Hello and welcome to Starcast, where we talk about the astrology of the month ahead, get you oriented for it, and then bring in a guest. Today's guest is my friend, astrologer Jenny Montgomery, who works therapeutically with her PhD in astrology in Missoula, Montana, and does fascinating work on multi generational astrology and charts. Uh, but this is the week of Thanksgiving, always a tricky week. It is the quintessential Sagittarius holiday, and because we are supposed to bring our thoughts to gratitude, thankfulness, what brings joy in our life, that Sagittarian quality. It's also the most traveled holiday of the year, which is very Sagittarian, as the sign of the centaur, half human, half horse, all about movement and uh, and communication and getting our word out and speaking the truth and searching. But Sagittarius is also the sign where, if we're not honest with ourselves, one of the best liars in the zodiac. So here we are heading into a time of with relatives with Mercury retrograde, and people are feeling a little touchy. We have a grand trine in water signs. At the same time, we have this fiery, outspoken, foot in mouth Sagittarian frankness. And every Saturday Night Live skit you've seen with Adele coming in and saving the dinner table because Aunt Ruth is putting her foot in her mouth is such a Sagittarian moment. We see the present president has Moon in Sagittarius. Sometimes the way Sagittarius works is they think they're telling the truth, but where the lie starts is within. So our trick this during this time is first be honest with ourselves and notice when another person is being honest with themselves. This grand trine in water signs is bringing up a lot of emotions to the surface. We have Saturn and Neptune both retrograde conjunct at one corner. Mercury and Venus. Now, Venus goes into Sagittarius this weekend, but right now, as we're heading into the holiday, Venus is in Scorpio, Mercury is in Scorpio, and they both trine Jupiter down here in Cancer. This time is just ripping with potential. We have huge solar flares. We had great aurora borealis up here, but we know that when the sun is active and shooting off coronal mass ejections, it turns up the volume on all the other transits here on Earth. And this grand trine and water sign is bringing up so much emotion and about looking back because we have Mercury is retrograde and will be through the holiday. Saturn and Neptune, grand trine in water signs with 5 planets, all retrograde. So be careful where you bring your mind to the past. When the relatives start up, see if you can bring your mind to what was the moment of joy. Where do they connect? What are the good memories? What do they want to bring forward? What are we proud of in the family that we can take into the next level? What are our favorite recipes from the past that remind us of someone? Be aware that this is a very powerful grand trine, and during this grand trine, several people are leaving the earth. Jimmy Cliff just died, an important part of my musical soundtrack of my life. And, and I've had several friends that also have left. And it is not close, but close enough. And I think a lot of people are experiencing this sense, whether it is a recent loss or just a memory of who's missing from the table this year and who may not have been here for a decade, but can sit with us with all of this grand trine and water signs. And with that flow, we can touch into a deeper place, a powerful place, and quite a beautiful place. So let's see how we can work with that. Take with that grand trine working, we want to take that down into our heart and into our souls. And we talk about this weekend after this very um, luckily it's Aquarius on moon while everybody's getting ready for Thanksgiving. Then the moon goes into Pisces right in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner times, and we'll be in Pisces through Saturday. keeping those emotions soft. Ask people to not push yourselves on the weekend. Do not push people to make things happen. Let them puddle out after Thanksgiving. Let them kind of suspend a schedule while Mercury is stationary, getting ready to turn direct on Saturday. But in that time, it turns direct Saturday morning, and when it turns direct, it's stationary. It does not move for 2 days. It sits there and then begins to move forward. But while it's so slow, Mercury of all planets hates holding still. Everything does best when the slower we take it, more still, the deeper we go. It's an important time for family conversations while the moon is still in Pisces and our hearts are still soft and the our Mercury is just turning direct and some secrets are coming out, to be very gentle with what's said then. Then the moon goes into Aries on Saturday night. And if you want to have Friendsgiving, to get away from family and be more contemporary, or to take your family to do something present and in the moment, Saturday night cooks. Then Sunday, we've got the um, fire sign lineup. We're heading into this. There'll be more traveling. Venus goes into Sagittarius, and people will be ready to travel in a way that they weren't on Saturday. We have on December 1st, on Monday, we start to hit the ground running. Mercury will still be in Scorpio, but it'll be direct. It'll still be in that grand trine, a good time to begin to get the word out. If you have a website to update, a proposal to pitch, really consider kicking that into gear on Monday and Tuesday. The Sun goes into Sagittarius, Mercury is moving forward. That moon in Aries is really ramping it up. Remember that people have been dealing with retrograde planets for many months, for many weeks. Sorry, Mercury retrograde. We go back to what you let go at the end of October and the beginning of November. Pick up those missing threads, find out what everybody else is doing, and bring them closer to you and to your life, and see what we can do with that. So we want to take those threads, get them going. Now through the rest of the month, so you know, most of December will be very active. We'll see Venus and Mars will be both in Sagittarius. They'll be traveling, talks about leaving, honesty, movement, and political movement and engagement in the world. And it's not a materially focused holiday. With those planets in Sagittarius and this grand trine that continues to cook for quite a while until Mercury heads back into Sagittarius mid-month, um, people want your time. They want a creative process. They don't need lots of stuff. But if you do want to give them stuff, make it practical. This year, we know that we're all facing economic uh, troubles. So, a gift certificate for fuel oil or food or a donation in their name is a powerful way to go. But time and energy and humor together can be a way of working with this forward. This winter solstice coming up on December 21st at 8:03 a.m. out here in Montana, and 2 hours later out on East Coast, 1 hour earlier on the West. You've got this lineup of Capricorn planets. Mars will be in Capricorn by then. Sun, the moon heads into Capricorn. It's going to be a very busy time right before the holidays. A lot of political shenanigans is my suspicion as we cook. Saturn has just turning direct now. Neptune will be turned direct. Mercury will be direct. Jupiter will still be retrograde, and so will Uranus. But we're going to start to see the beginnings of the next chapter politically in a big personal way. And so I wanted to see what this did to the American chart. And on the American chart, one of the pieces that I'm watching is our progressed Mars backing up to conjunct Saturn. And the last time this happened was 1977, the year that the first personal computer came out. Apple computers were incorporated. The first um, cellular networks were set up. It was a time where technology shifting made a huge difference in the work and communication level for our country. And I'm seeing that happening now. I don't think we can see, like we couldn't then, how much difference it was going to take when that first Commodore computer was marketed and when Apple came online for the first time and when cell phones began to be a possibility, that we didn't know how much that was going to change our world. And I don't think we know how much it's going to change our world, our work, our, uh, what is important to us and how do we make this happen. Uh, at, but we're going to be seeing huge differences over the next in this part of the process. We know that the progressed moon for America is now in Aries, that we started that new moon cycle a couple of years ago, that right now, that moon in Aries, Saturn and Neptune were in Aries last summer. They retrograded back, and coming this spring, and starting in February and March, we'll see them come back to that place. And we hope that it's about, Neptune talks about what do we idealize? What do we vision? And Neptune in Aries can be visioning war, visioning conflict, or it can be visioning starting that bravery of starting over. I think of bulbs coming up through the snow every spring as the epitome of healthy Aries vibration. So watch that idealization or the test of idealization of conflict and remember to help direct it towards what comes back alive. What comes back alive in us? So before I want to take us now and bring in our guest here, and Thanksgiving is a wonderful time to talk about uh, family dynamics and as we see in astrology. So, Jenny, welcome. This is our picture of Thanksgiving. I'm going to remove that and bring you on. Tell us about your work, which is so fascinating to me.
Oh, thank you, Heather. I am really happy to be here and chat with you. And that was a good overview of this season and all of its potency. Yeah, so you and I know each other we're real life friends here in Montana. I live down in Missoula, where I've lived for about 11 years and grew up in the Pacific Northwest. I was really into astrology as a child. I was given a little computer when I was about 13, a little LED machine that could allow me to cast charts in the halls of my junior high school, and I've been at it ever since. So, when I lived in New York City for about 10 years, first started seeing clients in the 90s, and I was lucky to be able to study the history of astrology at Columbia University for a long time, and got a PhD, met a Montana boy, and ended up out here. So,
That's wonderful. Glad you're here. And tell us about your work. What brought you to astrology and to particularly your specific work on multi-generational approach?
well, gosh, I think that's probably pretty evident in my chart. I have a Neptune moon opposition with Neptune in the 12th, and I've Saturn near the roots of the chart, and a Pluto Sun conjunction in Virgo. You know, that
So
Pluto Uranus
always
Sun,
looking
right?
underneath and
Just
curious
always
about it.
digging, always talking to the grandparents, talking to the old people, collecting the stories,
That's Saturn down at the bottom of the chart.
Yes,
Elders.
right, and yet, so that also I think shows a little bit of hardship in the family tree. So I
Mhm,
was real
mhm.
interested in, what happened during the Great Depression, and what was up with our working class family, and even the stories of migration from the old country
Yeah.
that were driven by hardship. So yes, some of it to do with my own story, my love of research, feeling as a child connected to
Mhm.
family members who had passed on, feeling an odd connection with a little girl who died in the 20s of diphtheria and like, inheriting a chest full of her stuff. And I just think it's always been there.
Wonderful. Yeah, many years ago, I started my work at working as the staff astrologer for some family therapists back in New England, and we had a chance to go. That they worked with multi-generational family patterns, and I got to go back and do the charts back a few generations and watch the trends. And I haven't heard many other astrologers talk about that. It's so fascinating to see those generations in a person's chart. Now, it looks like you've got some really interesting work. Would you like to share your screen and I can begin to and tell us about the work and how what would you like us to know about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, okay. So I think first what I'll say is that I recently taught a 6-week course with Kaylee, the Celestial Arts
Hmm.
Education Library, and it was called Three Deep. Oops, I'm not sharing the
Hmm.
right screen here. Okay, so it was called Three Deep. So that meant
Hmm.
was about looking at the chart with an eye to 3 generations of family history. So can you help me here, Heather? Are you seeing my screen?
I see it's still blank. You need to click on, there we go. I can add that to the stage.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. Yeah, so in that class, what we did was yeah, it was a pretty tight-knit group of about maybe 12 of us actually. And so we started before the class even began. I made a little video for people and said I would like folks to make a genogram. So that's what we're looking at here. And it looks like kind of a bunch of gobbledygook. But essentially, it's a map that's showing here 4 generations in a family, and there's color coding here. This is a map that's focused on heritage. You don't have to
Hmm.
do one
Hmm.
focused on heritage, but it's
Hmm.
pretty interesting.
Hmm.
And then those squiggly lines and straight lines and double lines, those are indicative of types of relationships in this family. So. Um, Here we're gonna this is Ross Geller's genogram from Friends. So
Wow.
what makes a genogram
Hmm.
different from a family tree is
Hmm.
that we're capturing relationship dynamics, and we're capturing, oftentimes we'll begin to see patterns. So the X's represent people who've passed away. Then we have, who doesn't like who. We've got health conditions.
That squiggly
Uh,
red line is who doesn't like who.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yes, exactly. And I encouraged everybody kind of make up your own symbols that make
Hmm.
sense to you.
Hmm.
It's interesting to do a genogram like quick and dirty before you do any research or you go into Ancestry or call,
Hmm. Hmm.
Aunt Marion. Just like, what do you know? What is your conscious awareness of the family? Constellation. And so this is an example of a quick and dirty, and then you can go back and do a more
Hmm.
exact one. And I really like that this one contains the dog. The dog is,
Mine would have
sometimes
many down there, right? Yes.
exactly. Yeah. So here's a health genogram.
Mhm.
So doctors and geneticists use those. This is
Mhm.
another health genogram that's showing yeah, incidence of different diseases. Another beautiful heritage diagram.
Mm,
And
lovely.
yeah, this is
Yeah,
Frida
Diego
Kahlo.
Rivera and Frida Kahlo, yes.
Really
Lovely, no
cool.
wonder they're beautiful mandalas. Mhm.
Yeah, gorgeous. Yeah, gorgeous. This is just a genogram that's with post-it notes, so that you can kind of work out the patterns, move people around. This could be used as like a first draft. And here's a lovely genogram made by a friend of mine during her training as a psychotherapist, and it was so large that she had to roll it out in her driveway. And yeah, there you can see it's really
Mhm.
quite a
Mhm.
work of art. And this is the code that she came up with. And it's got addiction, it's got mental illness, it's got cancer, it's got what people are, you know which people are aligned with other people. And again, it's like, coming up with your own. can
How did
really
you bring this back to astrology? How did you trace that?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So here we have a little section from a genogram. This is 6 generations of women. And as we look over on the left, we are looking at some of the natal aspect patterns. So once you've got the big picture, you might say, hey, I really want to check out this pattern around people having accidents at a certain age, or I want to understand why the oldest child always ends up being an overachiever, or, why does so and so, a repeated pattern of people, especially having things happen at certain ages,
Mhm,
or
mhm.
certain people who are occupying repeated roles. And often if there's been a family trauma some generations back, that can show up, be echoed in family members down the line. So one thing that I've taught the kids about was, sorry, the students, was a book called Love's Hidden Symmetry by Bert Hellinger. And then also there's a incredible book by called The Ancestor Syndrome by Ansel and Schutzenberger. So incredible anecdotes there. For example, every firstborn son for generations in a man's family had a car accident or a carriage accident on their first day of school while being driven by their father. And this configuration was constant for 150 years in the family.
Wow.
Yes. And,
Mhm, mhm.
we've also got people who develop cancer, for example, at the same age as an ancestor, as a grandfather. So a man who developed testicular cancer at age 39, and also had cancer in his lungs at the same age and the same 2 organs as his maternal and paternal grandfathers. So just crazy. So it's almost as the ancestor syndrome can also be a kind of anniversary syndrome. If there's been a loss of a child in a family, when we noted this, you'll see this with your clients, and I think you have personal experience. If there's been a child loss, another baby will often be born on that day, the same
Mhm.
day. Yes.
Yep, as,
Yeah.
and with the process we are bringing, my mother put a child up for adoption 9 years before I was born, who was born on my birthday. I was born on his birthday.
Wow.
And, yes, so, it's a really interesting pattern of that reflection, and we've had other and both of my kids were due on that day, but came early. So the process with what I've also noticed on this is I will see in the repeating family patterns, for instance,
Mm.
uh, 3 generations born with Saturn opposed Mars and the conflict
Oh,
in the
yes.
family between I don't know how to both be responsible and do what I want. And half of those people will have lived out Saturn opposed Mars as I'm going to go with what I want, screw responsibility, and
Yeah.
others go like, "I'm gonna be responsible, screw what I want." And then finally you see a kid with Saturn conjunct Mars or Saturn sextile Mars,
Mm,
and you go
mhm.
like, "Okay, this person is beginning to resolve that family tension." The repeating pattern that shows up over and over again is now coming into resolution. We're seeing some progress
Yes,
in this next generation.
that's right. It's starting to be worked out. And often that can be because it's being talked about.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
both Bert Hellinger and Schutzenberger talk about the potency of family secrets. And a modern astrologer, Erin Sullivan, wrote extensively about this in her
Uh,
book Dynasty, The Astrology of Family Dynamics.
and
Absolutely brilliant
she
book.
was a hot ticket. Yes, that
Yeah,
was it's
yeah.
like she was really
You
great.
knew her. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
she was
So,
great.
yeah, and so the less that something's talked about, it's almost as if we're positing that there is a family unconscious. And Jung talked about this. It was kind of one of the strata beneath the personal unconscious, sort of between the personal unconscious and the collective, where there's a family unconscious, a
Mhm,
multi-generational family system that has its own deep memory.
mhm,
And
which
just
you
like
can see over and over again.
over and over, and it has not only has a memory, it has a memory for dates. It has a memory
Mhm,
for, so yeah, my question has been for a long time, okay, so are we seeing an emphasis here not only on planetary archetypes, but with the date repetition, an emphasis on actual tropical astrological degrees, or we could
Mhm.
also say
Mhm.
Sabian symbols.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so when
That's
I
interesting.
teach,
I see more in the
yes,
aspects, but what are you seeing as far as the Sabian symbols? And the Sabian symbol is there is an image for every degree around 360 degrees around the zodiac. And
yes.
those images were originally channeled. There's several variations on them, but they tell you a lot about each degree, the 30 degrees of every sign. So yes, take
Exactly,
it
exactly.
back to
Yes,
you.
and that goes back to the traditional idea of the monomoria, or every single degree of the zodiac having a planetary ruler, so that each
Hmm. Hmm.
degree has a character. And one of the students in a recent workshop discovered an incredible repetition of birthdays between, I believe it was like 16 April and 18 April over 4 generations or five
Hmm.
generations.
Hmm.
So there's this real focus, and I just encouraged I don't remember what the Sabian symbol was there, but he did look it up. And also we could look at it and say, well, okay, here we have, if we have a closely clustered group of dates like that, maybe they're falling in a similar decan or in a similar bound. Let's really look at the story that's being repeated there. And
Hmm.
is it pointing towards something that's not been talked about or metabolized? So the image
Hmm.
that we're
Hmm.
looking at, uh, I noted, a long time ago, wow, there's been a real pattern of child loss and child illness in my family. And my son was born with no signs of life and a brain injury, which resulted in cerebral palsy. And he's, happy, bright, amazing kid.
It's an
Uh,
amazing kid.
yeah, he's fantastic. But I just really see some parallels here. These are simply looking at outer planet aspects over
Hmm.
on the left-hand column. So we can go a lot deeper into this. But when I first pulled this out of the genogram to analyze this sub pattern, noting that Uranus and Pluto are hitting a lot of us women really directly. So we've got a Pluto Moon conjunction in the chart of a great great grandmother who had a stillborn child and 2 children who died in terrible accidents, and one disabled child. So she's got Pluto Moon and Sun square Saturn, and a Neptune Venus square. Neptune square Jupiter Venus. Well, I have Neptune square Jupiter Venus. I have Pluto on the sun.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, and so I'm not going to name everything. If the viewers can see a lot of these repetitions
Yeah.
and so in the generation
Yeah, and the
before,
takeaway what I'm hearing, the takeaway is
yeah,
that when there is a pattern, it gets replicated down. It's the family journey to heal, to learn, to work with, to
to
make the
heal
most of,
it.
and to heal
Yes.
it.
Right, and exactly, how does that happen? And so that's I think that the path to healing is making the pattern visible, but bringing to light what's been transmitted transgenerationally, especially if it's unspoken. So what I remember hearing about, these great great grandmothers is that they didn't talk a lot about it. They just, it was a horrible thing. I heard she never got over it, especially the loss of a 2-year-old to a gunshot wound, self-inflicted gunshot wound.
Mm.
And that, yeah, I mean, I can
So the
imagine that
2-year-old was
the
playing with the gun?
2-year-old picked up a gun that was laid down in the kitchen, and that this is reverberating, uh, over 100 years later,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
and by finding how there, as Schutzenberger calls it, the crypt, when a tragedy gets trapped and gets passed down, it's sort of like the living carrier of the story or the secret or the undiscussed wound or shame or trauma. It's sort of like a ghost. And so yeah, then this can be freed, and then the quote unquote phantom can leave in peace, once we understand that historical, social, emotional context
Mhm.
of a family event. Then
And
the
we know
wounds
that
can heal.
there are genetic ways that this changes. You can see the epigenetics of it
Yes,
throughout a people. When a trauma happens, it affects the cortisol levels, it affects the nervous system in a very technical way for
yes.
generations.
That's right. That's right. And so, yeah, we think about the repetition of mental
Mhm.
illness or physical illness or, other things that can
Or
be
just depression that we're working
expressed.
with. Yeah.
Yes, right. So finding your place in the family repetitions, finding your place in the lineage, differentiating yourself from the family. Bert Hellinger talks about a kind of mechanism of family loyalty that we may
Mhm.
say, oh no, I don't feel any loyalty to repeat being an alcoholic or to, repeat having, a certain number of wives or husbands, but that there is something so deeply primal that we may feel a debt to our ancestors for providing the conditions that give us life, that this unspoken loyalty can lead us to make unconscious decisions, even to refuse medical treatment and then die at the same age as an ancestor. So
I have an example on, and again, if you can find the astrological signature of it in a chart,
yeah.
then you can help find another way to live out that signature. You're going to live it out,
Yes.
but you don't
Yes.
have to repeat it in the same pattern.
That's exactly right. Yes, that's exactly right. So so in our healing, I can stop sharing my screen now. In our work, we did ancestral altars. People
Mhm.
did rituals. We had people who created artworks as part of their final project, so that they could, yeah, work in a meditative space or work with plant medicine. Writing letters to ancestors was a practice that we studied that goes back to ancient Egypt.
Mm,
Um, Yes. So, yeah, yeah, that was really
that sounds
quite
fascinating. That's great
quite
ways of working with that. And now, how do we heal? Because that's one of the pieces I think as astrologers that are interested in not just predicting but in helping support the healing process. If we
yeah,
can see how what is the astrological pattern, what's the deep core archetypal pattern that is being lived out in this process, and work on, I call my work choice centered astrology, because I want to find other ways to how do we express that, how do we open up the potential of that and help you live it out. I say you can't stop a river, but you can redirect it. How do
right.
you redirect those patterns to come up to their gift? We really
I
see. Hmm.
Yes, and we looked at particularly the houses, the fourth, eighth, and 12th house
Hmm.
houses as
Hmm.
being these houses that can get us mixed up with the dead. And yeah, the 12th house can be things that are in our, outside of our peripheral vision. It could be secrets that we don't know. It could be presences that are showing up somatically. It could be even something ghostly. In
Hmm.
the eighth
Hmm.
house, we had a couple of Aaron Sullivan postulated that the eighth house was had a lot to do with inheritance, but also those places where the dead might be showing us little signs, or that people could actually
Guidance.
experience, yeah,
And that's
hauntings.
a form of inheritance, guidance from ancestors or guidance from the
Absolutely.
other realms.
Yeah, my good friend, an astrologer who has some indigenous background, has the moon in the eighth house, and his inheritance has been, in fact, significant
The
dream
lineage.
teaching from a
Mm,
grandmother, significant,
beautiful.
from the mother grandmother showing up in a dream and transmitting sky knowledge.
How
Uh,
much more moon in this eighth can you get? Yes.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. And then, yes, and then obviously the fourth is not only, our domestic situation, the household we're living in, the household we grew up in, but honestly, the entire root system as we
Hmm.
experience it. And
Hmm.
each sibling in a family will have a different experience of it. So yeah, things that have showed up, like a lot of Mars in the fourth can be the impact of war on a family or conflict. Neptune in the fourth can be experiences with loss, orphaning, addiction. Pluto in the fourth, trauma or significant secrets or shameful secrets.
Hmm.
Yeah, Saturn, class
I
issues.
I remember two charts that were born very close together time-wise when there was that Uranus Pluto conjunction of the mid 60s with Mars involvement, Saturn opposite it, and they had that in their fourth house. And I talked about trauma and tumult in the home, destabilizing. And one said yes, it was traumatic childhood, much abuse from my father, which is why I became a social worker and now I work as a family therapist. I go, beautiful use of it.
Yes,
I ran it by the
gorgeous.
next one. I said, trauma, like
Mm.
tumult in the household. Said, no, we had a great time, great family. My dad was a general, and there were bombs in our basement. So
Wow.
it was literalized, but in like
Yes.
symbolically the same, but lived out very differently.
Yeah, yeah, I love these stories. And in my practice, I always try to take a family history going back, as far as the person remembers. And so in my, this is just an example, covering up the name, but this is my notes when I'm in my reading. I'm
Mm-hmm,
just
mm-hmm,
going
mm-hmm.
back through and yeah, and then just circling the patterns. Inevitably, there are patterns that are going to show up, and it's always fascinating. But yeah, we got very interested in ideas about the soul from different cultures, especially those where ancestor reverence is practiced. So in
Mm-hmm,
Taoist households where
mm-hmm.
there is an ancestral altar or picture, and oftentimes food offerings are left out. And we saw that in ancient Egypt, where I talked about the letter writing practices. There are still papyri surviving where people are like, hey, Grandpa, could you help us out with the purchase of this, cow, or so and so is having trouble getting pregnant? But this, yeah, there's an expectation of active intervention by deceased family members and integration into daily problem solving and physical spaces that are dedicated to that interaction.
That's beautiful.
Yes.
And I think astrology gives us that map, and it leaves the doors open for how we can choose to be empowered by that map, not predestined by that map.
Yes, absolutely. And then when and another thing worth mentioning is the fun and how edifying it is to cast charts for relatives if we have birthdays and years, which we can find in ancestry.com. So everybody in the my workshops using ancestry.com,
Isn't
we
it
don't have a
fascinating?
birth time, but we're casting that chart.
But you
But
can see
just
the
like
patterns.
we
You just
can
don't
we
know
can
houses.
Yes, exactly. The moon, we have a little, we know the arc in which the moon is probably
Hmm.
could possibly
Hmm.
fall, but we don't throw it away just because we don't have a birth time. Just like you wouldn't throw away, a Babylonian clay tablet that had part of, broken off. You're going to keep it and read it. And it can actually change your perception of yourself. We are so radically individualized, as modern people, that when you start looking at several charts in your family that look quite a bit like your own in
Hmm.
many respects, it starts to make you feel, oh, okay, maybe I'm not the rose, I'm the rose bush.
Hmm.
I'm the latest flowering of this rose bush that's putting out a new generation every year, and it can kind of shift into that
Yeah,
sense of identification with lineage that is so common in traditional people and can really be very nourishing.
that's beautiful. I often see when a chart comes in and I see these separating aspects, and it often feels like they have stepped out of a past life where those issues first came into play, and they walk into a family that is working out those same issues. So it might be they might not have an experience in their childhood. Like, my image is if you die in the middle of a battlefield, you might be born in the middle of a family feud. If you
Mhm.
leave a situation where you are, where, there was misuse of anger and temper, and then you walk into a situation where the family's recovering from something that just happened where there was a real misuse of anger and temper, you don't need to know the past, but you're taking that soul lineage forward. You'd see that in
Yeah.
separating aspects. And now how do you heal that and honor that healing process that's bigger than your life story was to show, because you're healing your family and you're healing your other lives at the same time.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, and for a long time, when I first started studying astrology in the 90s, there was a lot of talk about the nodes and past lives, and this is still, a great way to look at the nodes. And in our, from doing this work, I definitely feel like the nodes are connected as well to the family unconscious.
Mhm,
But
mhm,
it makes us ask all kinds of big questions about time
mhm.
and the concept maybe of a block universe where past, present, and future are all happening at once.
Right.
So, maybe this chart is actually resonating in the great big now, but just in a different time and place.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I think it's a
So,
real way of looking at it that empowers people not to feel trapped by their family patterns. Now, one of the things I sort of have a subspecialty of dealing with adopted charts, as I had one brother adopted out, one brother adopted in, my mate was adopted by relatives, and I've got a chance to watch how, and I found out that I'm sort of half adopted because I was donor conceived. And I can see that I have astrological resonance. My father has a stellium on my Saturn, my heart father who raised me. Um, and that I have great connection with that lineage and a different connection when I finally got a hold of some of the bio family that you could see they're both strong in druidic patterns because I work with the OBUD, Order of Ovates, Bards, and Druids. Do a work with healing your blood lineage and your milk lineage, or who nurtured you, who fostered you, who adopted you, and that how important both lineages feed into you. And you can see the astrological resonance on both sides. It is fascinating. It's not just the biology of it.
absolutely. Oh, absolutely. No, sometimes there's a very clear image of a child who would, yes, like biologically, they had to come in through this route, but they were destined to be raised and participate in the growth of another family.
Hmm.
And yeah, yeah. And that you'll see those connections very much in the synastry. Yeah. Yeah, and our idea of how much we are or how much we belong to family changed a lot with Christianity, where the idea of a spiritual family is meant to take precedence over, bio-earthly parentage. So there's a
Hmm.
lot of stuff in the
Hmm.
Bible, about stepping away from your mother and father, or my mother and brothers are those who hear God's word. And it's all about being children of God, being born again. So and this, there was also changes in burial practices where ancient Greeks would bury the family near, or the idea of intramural burial being even within the house or within the family walls in prehistoric, communities.
I mean,
And
they
then
really
the
were with you. My parents are with
Yeah.
us. Yes, they're in that wall. Right.
Exactly, exactly. And then we have this kind of spiritualist new age idea of soul groups.
Hmm.
And chosen family is so important for all of us, but I know, a lot of young people for whom it's really, really central. And that idea, I kind of wanted to see, well, where did this idea of soul families come from? And I really didn't find it until coming across Blavatsky talking
Oh,
about,
interesting.
yes, Madame Blavatsky talked about this purposeful reincarnation, and that we're sort of guided by karma that affects groups of people so that souls might be connected across lifetimes. And Edgar Casey also described how souls would sort of plan out their incarnations and choose families and circumstances in order to learn things or resolve karmic patterns. And yeah, so that was kind of a modern thing, but I think that Blavatsky got it from Buddhist tales. There are some tales called the Jataka tales, where
Hmm.
Buddha identifies other characters around him as identities of people from his life. So,
Mm.
yeah, so in his past lives, he's like seeing his father and his son, and so they show up over and over, and these positive or negative karmic imprints can be carried forward, and things can be resolved. Karmic debts can be resolved. So, some
Often
people
you can see if
resonate.
people say, "Oh, I know that person from another lifetime. I knew them, like, the minute I saw them,
Yeah.
I," and you can usually see the astrological connections between their 2 charts.
Oh
Uh,
my gosh,
yeah,
I
it's
know a
amazing.
woman who has the nodes right across her ascendant descendant. And I
Ah,
think it's the south node on the descendant. And I said, "Well, how
oh
did
my
you
goodness.
feel when you met your husband?" And she's like, "I felt like I knew him. I felt like I was
Right.
meeting my brother." Yeah, it was just an utter feeling of familiarity. So yeah, another really fascinating thing we got into was generational astrology and
Mhm, mhm.
looking at how when we are looking back at someone who has a very similar chart to us, we also have to recognize this person was part of a generation. And we talk about that in astrology, Pluto generations, the Pluto and Leo generation, roughly corresponding with the boomers or the hippie generation, and the Pluto Virgo, kind of moving towards Gen Z. And so that's been a
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
fascinating.
And the Uranus I remember, back when I was in part of NCGR chapter in Minneapolis, that they did 2 versions of that where we grouped everybody in the room according to which Pluto generation, let them talk amongst themselves and then do a small presentation for us of what that generation felt
Oh,
like. Then
fun.
we did it with Neptune and Uranus.
Ooh, yes,
And it was
yes.
really interesting, the overlaps, because they're all such different time periods. You'd break up and make a
Yeah,
difference. But what did you all have in common in those deep underpinnings of generational, what was going on in your generation? How did you feel connected to the world? How did you feel disconnected? What was power? What was your vision?
right.
What brought change into your life? All of that. It's really
Yeah,
fascinating.
yes, and you can kind of I keep these in my files now, and I was kind of inspired to make this little tree by the astrologer Kira Taborn, who's done it this way. So I've taken these way back
Mhm.
to,
Mm.
into the 19th century. So I have them for every generation. So you can see there's a lot of different, Pluto and Pisces type people. And there are a lot of, there's 3 different Neptune groups in there and 4 different Uranus groups. So how do we interpret generational Pluto? It's their deep evolutionary purpose. It's what they're bringing out. It's what they're
Mhm.
going to challenge their elders on. It's what they'll fight for,
Mhm.
what they'll
Mhm.
redefine, what they'll break down and rebuild. So, yeah, Pluto and Leo deconstructed the identity, collective identity, and they rebuilt the individual. There really wasn't a sense of the individual in
Right.
the same sense. Pluto in Libra redefined relationships, marriage, marriage changed completely with that generation. Generational Neptune can talk about modes of escapism or what they find glamorous,
What they
what's
idealize, yeah,
what they'll sacrifice for,
what they
the
get addicted by easily.
yeah, yes, their modes of illusion, deception, what's really dreamy for them. I think we were looking back at one generation where Neptune was in Leo, and it was kind of the movie stars with the hairdo, like the Marilyn Monroe hair. This kind of hair was really glamorous and kind of molded in this wavy pattern
Hmm.
and generational Uranus. What is going to shock this generation? What kind of technological breakthroughs will there be? How are they going to rebel against or change the matters related to the sign of Uranus, and where will they bring about change? So Uranus in Gemini from 41 to 49, there
Mhm.
was the code breaking during World War II, the first computers, Orwell talking about newspeak.
And how
Yeah,
much technology came in on during World War II during that time.
yeah, the transistors and all of that. And then yeah, the generation Uranus group before that from 1934 to 42, big shock to security, a big shock to born into the depression, rebelling against this banking system, the FDIC, Social Security, all these things that have to do with basic security are where this generation receives a shock. So I think that can help us to trans kind of try to imagine what it would be like. We don't see our generational placements for the most part because they're shared with so many of the
Mhm,
people that
mhm,
we
mhm,
that we know and identify with. But yeah, those that can help us to time travel, I think, a little bit, think ourselves into those placements.
mhm. And notice that those are always running in the background of any of the transits that we're dealing with now.
Yeah.
And so coming back to that, and looking at where, we know that we've just changed so many generations in this
Oh.
last year. And I think it's one of the shocks to our system that we're dealing with presently is,
Mhm.
we've got this time, it's a little bit of like, oh yeah, right, take a deep breath and go back in the springtime. But with Pluto going back and forth between Capricorn and Aquarius, now solidly in Aquarius, Saturn has left uh, it, and Saturn and Neptune, Pisces, then and what the difference that's Neptune going from Pisces to Aries. And that's such a big shift because it's the beginning and the end of the zodiacal spin. It's like where you're starting on a
Mm,
whole new cycle with Neptune, which
right.
takes 160 some years around the zodiac, to going into Aries. And that, how do we, I get, when we look in family patterns, you see Neptune is what how the family handles spirituality on a good day, connection, water, liquids, addictions, delusions, illusions, escapism.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
the family with strong Neptune,
codependency.
yep, all those
Right.
boundarylessness. But here
Mhm.
Neptune, and it's been a real issue with Neptune in Pisces. I think some of the illusion and some of the ways that we've gotten lost on social media and found no boundaries between, and are suddenly realizing cybersecurity is a terrible issue. All of the pieces about
Yeah,
those dissolved boundaries are coming fierce as Neptune goes into Aries, as it did last summer and
exactly.
will
I think
again.
I think about privacy, those porous
Exactly.
boundaries and then privacy and how might that be scooped up when
Mhm,
Neptune is in Aries or
mhm, or made
hopefully
fierce.
not yeah, hopefully
Mhm,
not weaponized.
mhm.
Um
Oh, I'm sure it will be, but that will help us make it
yeah.
fierce. You know,
Mm,
and I have a feeling that we have to really look at the nature of conflict, where it is coming alive versus where it is wasting our energy in conflict. That's gonna be one of the
right.
really
What are
great.
we fighting for? Are we
Right.
going to get off the sofa and fight for some things we need to fight for?
Mhm.
Or advocate might be a good
Mhm.
word.
There's
Yes,
so many
yes.
eras changing astrologically now.
Mm,
You talk about, and so many generations changing. It's a real beginning and end, as both Pluto and Uranus and Neptune, all your generational markers, have changed
yeah.
signs in a year.
It feels like a tipping point. It feels
Mhm.
like we just not only did we turn the page into a new chapter, but we turned the page into a new part, or even a new book.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm seeing so many people of my generation, or the older ones that are not necessarily so young anymore, that it's a new world. How do I adapt with all of these planets and different signs? How do I adapt? And I think they can. I think, but it's realizing, no, you can't go back to where it was. The astrological
Mm,
shift, the end and beginnings of new era is so strong during these year and a half, 2 years shift, that we really have to and how can I adapt to this new life? Where do I move forward? Where do I let go? How can I adapt to this new life?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm thinking about the Pluto and Leo generation now with Pluto in the opposite,
Yep.
you know, sign. And just it's interesting watching my folks in their 80s trying to wrap their heads around such a radical change of everything they grew
Hmm.
up with and took for granted about our country.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
And very exciting in the process, I think. And
Indeed,
yeah.
yes. Yeah, I've been reading this book called The Fourth Turning. It's called The Fourth Turning is Here, and the author is Nicholas Howe, but he's a student of generations, and
Mhm.
he's a
Mhm.
student of historical cycles, and he sees us as being in a crisis point, akin to World War II, the Civil War, the American Revolution. It's practically a Uranus. His cycles are about 80-year cycles. So it kind of
Mhm.
tracks with
Mhm.
Uranus, and we're like in this
Oh, it's
20.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. It's very
Mhm.
interesting
Mhm.
to check that book out. But he's hopeful because he's like, yeah, we're going into a crisis and breakdown. We're in the middle of it. But inevitably, after those periods, we go into we go into periods of healing, restabilizing, and then eventually a new awakening of new ideas. So yeah, it's not a it's not there's some hope in that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Hmm.
And how would you suggest that people first begin to approach that with their own chart?
Oh golly, I think a lot of people who are learning astrology will think early on, hey, I wonder what my mom's chart looks like. I wonder what my brother's chart looks like. And I think playing around with your astrology app or, wherever you like to work, astro.com, or even printing out charts and kind of looking over just your parents and your grandparents and yourself. Start to circle the things that you see in common. Frequently in families, there's repetition within signs, elements of outer planet involvement, specific degrees. I like to give students this thing. It's like a birthday tracker. You could used to have those little books where you keep everyone's birthday and start to write them down and track not only birthdays but death dates, major events in the family. Sometimes you can even find in ancestry.com dates of migration, uh, yeah, accidents, things that, you can kind of start to collect these degrees of the zodiac that have potency and begin to study them. And then I would say, maybe start to make a genogram that traces out those relationship patterns or repeated behaviors or accidents, uh, things like that. And then you want to find yourself an informant. Oftentimes the aunts will be the ones that will be willing to really tell you the stories
Spill the
about.
beans on the family
But
story.
yes, yes. Oftentimes it's like, your direct family line may be more hesitant to discuss secrets. And but yeah, if you can get just like, 1 degree off the that main line, you can find a lot of information. And those family secrets that you can hold them, honor them, metabolize them, it can be life-changing.
That is sounds fascinating. And uh, and any suggestions for people how they can deal with their many generations this Thanksgiving?
Oh gosh, I think this Thanksgiving we have an opening. I love this grand trine between
Yeah.
Saturn and Jupiter,
Mhm.
between
Mhm.
old patterns and then lines of expansion. Are going to have the benefics are in a wonderful alignment. And I think with that Venus Mercury, we can hopefully keep it light. And or maybe in Scorpio, there we can use this time to tell some family stories, even consider recording on your
Yeah.
devices what grandma has to say and how things were for her.
I think if this moment in the present gets tumultuous, which it can because, everybody is sensitive and outspoken. Grand Trine gives you the
Hmm.
sensitivity and feeling deep, and
Here we
the
go.
fire
Yeah.
signs is like, and another thing, or that deadliest
Yeah.
Sagittarius word, frankly, which always causes
Mm.
problems. That if we can just, um, like, and what happened 30 years ago? Let's go back, way back, and to
Yeah.
really kind of take it back. It's like dropping underneath the waves to the calm under the ocean,
Yeah.
to find that place together.
Well, we often will have Sag placements around Thanksgiving, and the joke is, to not talk about politics or religion, which are Sag topics. So, Yeah.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm pretty hopeful, but yeah,
Wonderful.
we do have a little bit of a hot Mars there. So
We do. And I still remember that wonderful SNL skit where every time the politics get a little strange, somebody cranks up Adele singing from the other side, and like everybody calms down for a minute, and they come back to their heart, and then they start talking
yes.
politics again. So yeah, find some way to kind of take your step outside from it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think if we can ask questions of one another,
Hmm.
there's so much to learn and much to be enjoyed.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on and talking with us today. I really appreciate that, Jenny. And maybe I'd love to hear more. You have a whole program on garments and astrology and a healing process with that that we didn't even touch.
Oh,
Just kind of give us,
yeah,
so when I bring you back on, what were
sure.
we talking about then?
Well, yeah, I can, if you go to my website, it's just jenny-montgomery.com. This in my astrology or yeah, somewhere on there you'll find Astral Garments, which was a project we did for the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus, which rules clothing and garments. And so we sought to make transformative or catalytic garments, oftentimes based around our astrological afflictions. So I have Mars on the ascendant. I made myself a leather jacket, but I incorporated a lot of Venusian flower imagery, and it's a beautiful Venusian color of leather. But I also created an embroidery of Mars phase pattern, the rose
That's
on the
fascinating.
jacket.
Again, it's a
Yeah.
healing, a healing pattern. It's a remedy,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I
It's
appreciate that.
remediation through clothing. And this is an old tradition. I was just looking at an image of a sort of a tunic, a
Mhm.
magical tunic from medieval Islamic times that's covered with prayers and has things sewn into it. And
Mhm.
um, so anybody can find the instructions to do that on my website, or if you search for astral garments, you'll probably find it.
Wonderful. And we may
Yeah.
bring you back on just to talk about that sometime.
Yay. Oh, thanks so
Okay.
much, Heather.
Thank
This was
you.
really
It's been
fun.
great. You take care, and we'll
Take
talk soon.
care.
Bye.
Happy Thanksgiving.